speaker is Laura Murphy, CEO Amplify Analytics, who will tell us how to optimize marketing spend. Laura, take it away.
John, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning for our American guests. You have to forgive me, my voice is a little croaky. I've got a bit of a sore throat, but I shall endeavor to be as clear as I possibly can. So as John mentioned, my name is Laura Murphy. I'm the founder and CEO of Amplify Analytics. We're a data science for business company. And what does that mean? It means that our passion is helping all kinds of commercial teams get benefits from using data to make better decisions wherever they are on their data literacy journey. Some organizations don't have much experience using data science. They might not have any internal team. And we work together right from the beginning, articulating the problem or the opportunity right through to providing data-informed outputs in a way that those teams can use them depending on those maturity levels. What unites all of our engagements with our various clients and partners around the world is to understand the business problem very clearly. So we spend a lot of time here, if you can see the green arrow on my screen, defining the problem or the opportunity that they are looking to tackle. Why do this, we ask? Why do it now? What would good look like if today is not good enough? What is unsatisfactory about the current situation? And often you have many stakeholders and they will have very different opinions on what the problem or the opportunity is. And so we use a combination of lean techniques to ensure that we're all aligned on the problem or the opportunity to solve. In the past, the allure, the temptation of the words like AI or data science was sometimes enough to make budget available. But we always advocate that a data science project is treated like any other, with a problem definition, clearly articulated outcome, and measurable impact. What we see today is that the backdrop of today's reality is quite different from that of 2 years ago, making these so-called measurable impacts much more difficult to calculate. As a generation of business leaders, we've been operating in and living through what we believed were uncertain times. Continual upheavals if you think about digitization, technology transformation. But the global nature of COVID-19 has no reference case in living memory. And something we thought unthinkable several months ago, a war in Europe is raging since February. Inflation and energy prices are through the roof. And trying to build a forecast in these times is challenging, to say the least. Compounding this problem even further, we've observed that many organizations became reliant, you could even say overly reliant on digital channels. Digital channels, especially for marketing purposes, and Gartner's survey of CMOs' spend and strategy said that 56% of the budget in 2022 went to these digital channels. Partly this was driven, of course, by the lower cost of such media, but to a large extent by the temptation of easily measured performance. And that latter was to a large extent fueled by cookies. So with Google announcing that it will end third-party cookies from Chrome by 2023, and Apple's Safari and Mozilla Firefox browsers already enabling users to opt out of ad tracking cookies, it puts FMCG, CPG in worse positions potentially versus other sectors, given the reliance on cookies. So it's not surprising that something we know from the past, market mix modeling, or MMM, is seeing somewhat of a resurgence. It had been somewhat cast aside by some performance marketeers in search of a more deterministic truth, let's say. According to the marketing specialists WARC in London, more than 4 in 10 respondents now use market mix modeling again, up from just over 30% 1 year ago. And there are good reasons for it as well. Thanks to advancements in technology, marketing mix modeling can be run every few weeks rather than quarterly or annually. Always on live models can be fed with estimates and benchmarks can allow real-time optimization. It sounds very tempting. Even data-rich digital platforms like Google and Facebook are starting to encourage brands to reconsider this kind of model over the last click attribution. But here comes back this challenge of data disruption. Many companies who invested in and built MMM or market mix modeling models struggle to make them very relevant today given the data disruption of the last 2 years. And this brings forth the need for a cross-functional approach. So to build useful models in the almost crisis is the norm mode, you really need a cross-functional approach. And we believe that the marketing team almost needs to step out from its silo of focusing solely on incremental growth and campaign ROI to take a cross-functional view of core activities, and not only those activities that are limited to marketing. The limited data and classic market mix modeling approaches typically don't analyze a large part of the business revenue, which is often called core sales or run rate business. The assumption is often that those core sales will remain stable or the run rate will just keep on running with very little nurturing. And COVID-driven shifts in demand patterns, in the way people buy, in sales channels, in brand loyalty, have put this logic to a very hard test. We see the need to connect these base nurturing activities, which are often owned by sales or account management, and growth activities, usually led by marketeers, become clearer to organizations as evidenced by the rebirth of the ownership of so-called line of sight to results across the functional silos. And what we see is the creation of roles like a chief growth officer, a chief customer officer, and sometimes these new style chief marketing officers who act more like general managers, taking a data-first approach, tend to look further than their own silos, their own discipline, to the entire value chain of the customer. And this hybrid position bridges traditional departmental silos such as business development, sales, marketing, operations, customer support, and even something like IT. And so while those customers are trying to understand omni-channel journeys of their customers and to add value all the way across this complex ecosystem of interactions, some historical models of analysis may no longer be able to cope with today's very dynamic, cross-silo, omni-channel reality that requires end-to-end insight for many teams across the business in order to bring true value to a customer. So going back to defining this problem or opportunity carefully, as I was talking about earlier, we are essentially trying to understand which channels and combination of channels drive the most sales. Data science actually can play a very important role here. Without going into too much detail, the elastic net model that you see on the screen now enables us to understand the direct and indirect performance of marketing activities on sales, but most importantly, their relationships to each other as well. Translated into a business context, this approach enables business leaders to inspect the direct and indirect drivers of sales across online and offline channels simultaneously, and then crucially allocate budgets across the right teams and the right channels for maximum effect. It enables us to provide granular understanding of what drives sales performance beyond the amount spent on different media, such as TV spend, for example, and its impact on search patterns, on volumes, both online and offline. Further, it helps identify and manage sales leading indicators, such as pricing, distribution, display, and promotional activities. It can even incorporate the impact of customer service levels on sales performance as well. But to get to this holistic view is, of course, not very easy. And we really advocate assembling a multidisciplinary team representing the business whose job it is to develop a set of hypotheses of how the business generates its sales. This work informs budget allocation very specifically. If you invest a certain amount in awareness-driving channels, say TV, for example, what budget do you need to allocate to, for example, paid search activities on Google and Amazon to ensure that you catch and convert the generated customer interest all that way back at TV? Taking this further, you can create for yourself a set of early warning signals. Going back to our example just now, insufficient search volume, you're unlikely to make the conversion. Importantly, the key leading indicators of sales model works on aggregated marketing data. So it is future-proof for tomorrow's world when third-party cookies may not be around anymore. So once we have worked out together what is the optimal budget allocation across the channels, the next step is to maximize effectiveness within each channel. Taking advantage of new techniques in reinforcement learning, the model is able to expect and process changing conditions and optimize in real time. Again, I won't go into too much detail, but since there's a lot of talk about reinforcement learning at the moment, I will try and give you a bit of a layman's description of what it actually does. So in traditional machine learning paradigms, algorithms are trained to learn patterns on a batch of historical data. As we said, various factors make historical data difficult to use. Reinforcement learning offers an alternative because it involves training an AI agent that learns to take optimal decisions based on its dynamic interactions with its environment there and then. It interacts with its environment with the goal of maximizing a cumulative reward through time. Now, this sounds a little abstract perhaps and theoretical, so let's take an example that probably a lot of us have experience with, because the way that these models work is somewhat like how a child learns from its actions. When a toddler is making its way around the house and discovering fun things to do, it seeks to repeat those activities to gain the reward of enjoyment, if you like. So the model is operating in a similar fashion, looking for reward. Of course, when you're a toddler, some of the actions have unpleasant outcomes, such as accidentally burning your hand on the stove or bumping your head on the table as you're exploring. And over time, the child learns that these are activities that they do not enjoy and seeks almost to avoid the pain or the punishment that such actions entail. And so the reinforcement learning algorithm actually works in a very similar way. It learns what reward looks like, and it learns what pain or punishment looks like, and it is able to improve its outcome by applying its rewards over a period of time. Applied to digital advertising, it uses a complex combination of parameters such as target audience, search category, platform, device, browser, advertising space, all of this sort of thing to enable it to develop its own reward. And the high frequency of the reward comes from hundreds and thousands of auctions available every day. Therefore, it's very applicable to a digital marketing environment, because with these hundreds of thousands of interactions, the agent can further improve the outcome little by little. From a process speed and volume perspective, the algorithm actually mimics human learning by using over 1,000 daily iterations to produce the best possible bid options per advertising group and campaign. And it's equivalent, just as an example, to the collective learning of 100 digital marketeers or advertising managers working as a team. But it happens daily in an automated fashion within a few minutes. Now, moving on from the data science part to look at how it actually works for you people, for digital marketeers in real life, let us take a look at one of those channels that we then seek to optimize. If we take a look at, for example, Google search and paid search as a channel and how we apply reinforcement learning. So if you remember, thanks to the earlier part, thanks to our hypotheses work that we have done, we know how much to invest across the different channels. Now what we need to do is optimize how we work within one given channel, and the example that we have here on Google Ads. We know, of course, that customers click on ads that are relevant to them at that point in time. Often current ways of working are partly manual, they're rule-based, they don't consider learnings from historical data performance, nor live changing conditions in which customers operate. So this relevance calculator helps exactly these kinds of professionals to improve the relevance of ads in real time. Unlike alternatives that need historical data, and of course we've talked about how problematic historical data can be at this point in time, this model considers the visitor's current and changing conditions, like the day of the week, the time of the day, the season, and the location, to effectively win the click. Let me just show you a little what this can look like. So you have a dashboard which helps you to see the biggest opportunities. Either the campaign manager or an organization's own paid search team or marketing teams can see where there's more potential to get a better return on investment, which are signaled by the green lines over here. This is an opportunity for further investment because you're likely to get a better return on your investment. You can hone down from there into micro level, so in geographies. And here we can see that in Germany and in Portugal, there are untapped opportunities that are listed as identified untapped potential. You can also analyze historical returns in a specific period. And this is super useful because you can see here the red bars, they are representing, and especially this big one here, they are representing missed opportunities to get a better return. So campaign managers can actually use the tool to learn, to educate their teams, and to try and prevent this sort of thing happening again. And finally, they also use it to optimize their budget, which will then, you give the bidding tool a budget, it will then optimize it across campaigns, selecting those most likely to be relevant in changing conditions. And as I mentioned, the reinforcement learning discipline within data science plays a very important role here because it brings a new way to adapt to changing conditions and to optimize activities in real time. So I'd just like to share a couple of results from clients of ours, and there are many more around the world who are starting to embrace the power of reinforcement learning. But just picking on two very briefly. So on the left-hand side, a major UK client estimates the return on investment to be around €1 million, representing a 2% increase in online conversion within the first 6 months from this solution alone. The results also massively increase efficiency, with, if you see on the right-hand side, things like training times, onboarding times, also really being improved. And because reinforcement learning, remember the toddler, continues to educate itself, continues to become more and more efficient about what is a reward versus what is a punishment, these results are expected to increase over time. And finally, doing all of this, and obviously I've shared it in a 15-minute window, but doing all of this takes quite a lot of time, effort, resource, and understanding. And so we thought it would be useful today to share what we believe to be the key characteristics, let's say, of the right kind of data science partner. I mentioned right at the beginning that these kind of things do not happen on their own. And as we discussed early on, it is very important to get to the nitty-gritty of the business problem. You do that by having people that ask the right business questions to end up with a very good articulation of the business problem. The ability to keep it simple is very important. Even in organizations where there is a high level of data literacy, a data science partner should be able to make themselves understood by people who do not have experience in data science, using normal business language to describe the outcomes, to describe the method, etc. Often we see that data science, and especially AI, seems somewhat mystical in a lot of organizations, and we really advocate pushing to keep everything as simple as possible. Data is never clean. All of us know this. And so patience and persistence in working with data, no matter how challenging or unclean it may be, and a can-do attitude to discover what is possible rather than what is not possible. If I don't have that data source, can I find a proxy? This kind of thinking is very important in making a successful journey. A very important characteristic is this willingness to explain the process. I mentioned at the beginning that we pride ourselves on being a partner that lets teams, any kind of team, get access to data science, regardless of their data literacy level right now. And one of the things that we have found to really help in this is to explain the process from the beginning, explain what goes into a model, talk about the kind of characteristics that you are seeing in the model, bringing the organization, bringing the team on their data science journey. It often has a side effect of being an extremely useful learning journey as companies seek to improve their data literacy. And then finally, it goes almost without saying that you need top-notch data scientists to do this. There are many people today claim to be data scientists. It is those who have a very solid understanding of maths and statistics and computer science and business problems as applied in data science are those who are able to advise organizations the best on how they can best get value from their existing data. And finally, courage to share unexpected or difficult discoveries. You often find things in data you were not expecting. You may uncover decisions that were taken that were actually not the best decisions. And it's important to bring these out onto the table, because by doing this, you enable the organization to continue to learn. And finally, I would just like to say that we've recently published a paper in the peer-reviewed Journal of Applied Marketing Analytics, together with two of our clients in this domain, JOT, Internet Media, and Voiro, where we go into more detail on the uses of reinforcement learning and how it can really help us all in marketing and sales. So please do let us know if you would like to receive a copy of that. And with that, I will give up the floor and relieve my sore voice. I hope I was audible, and open the floor up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, Laura. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for the courage to go through that with your squeaky voice. But we understood you correctly, and I'm sure our audience appreciated your efforts. But we have a couple of questions for you. Number one, how many years of data are needed to create an accurate model?
It's an exceptionally good question, and it is also one of those questions where I unfortunately need to say to you, it depends a little bit. For the first part, where we look at the business hypotheses, we would say ideally 2 years of data before COVID and the 2 years of COVID data. This gives us pre-COVID as well as the new normal. But the beauty of the reinforcement learning approach, the second part that I was discussing, it essentially learns on the fly. So although it takes some time for the model to train, one can think about 3 or 4 months, you don't actually need a lot of historical data. We always say as data scientists, the more historical data you have, the better, but we can absolutely manage with the small amounts I mentioned just now.
Okay, Laura, here's another question for you. What types of data are collected for these studies?
So for when we're trying to determine which are the key leading indicators of sales, as I was mentioning at the beginning, we start actually working with an organization's team on formulating a list of hypotheses of what impacts their sales most and what is the possible consumer journey, because they generally have a strong hypothesis on what drives sales the most. So then we use those hypotheses to go and collect data, think about customer level, ideally weekly sales, search data, share of organic search, share of voice in paid search, all activations above and below the line, any kind of price moves, promotional kind of data is very useful to us as well. However, the general rule of thumb is we start working on it together. We look for the most useful data sources that could prove or disprove the hypotheses that the business team has come up with. And essentially, we take it from there because we know that most organizations do not have all this data neatly ready at their fingertips. And so going back to, what makes a good data science partner, you need to work with what you've got. Therefore, starting with the hypotheses that the team brings themselves, that they have hypotheses of what drives sales most, is the best place to start, and pinning down the data from there is the most practical way to go.
Okay, Laura, here's another one. What measures do you take to correct data disruption?
Oh, yeah. I think this is probably the most asked question in the world today when you talk around using data, historical data, to predict the future. So correcting for data disruption is actually pretty difficult. Essentially, what we do and what data scientists in the world talk about is we essentially add to the equation analysis of the so-called base, the base data, the things that pre-COVID were taken for granted. So base rate sales, for example, changes of split online versus offline, and then we try to layer on external analysis and external factors that almost indicate how far COVID has interfered, COVID and let's say the other crises that we're seeing at the moment, such as the war in Ukraine and spiraling energy and inflation costs. So we almost layer on some of these external data sources that can give you an indication of how the recent economic situation has caused the disruption. For faster moving environments like Google paid search, where we don't have to rely so much on historical data, we're able to deploy this reinforcement learning, which allows the algorithm to almost advise marketing managers real time on the action and constantly adapt to changes. So it's a combination really of taking practical steps to layer in, if you like, external data sources that can help you almost correct for the data disruption. And the beauty of using reinforcement learning is you almost don't need to rely so much on historical data, and you start to build up your short-term historical data from the get-go. So it's less of a problem.
Okay, and there's one more here, Laura. What other cases have you resolved with reinforcement learning?
So if you think about reinforcement learning, it has actually been around for quite a long time. Its application in sales and marketing is quite new. So in addition to the example that I gave you today, there have been various optimization problems that have been solved, or let's say improved, by using reinforcement learning. I mentioned, for example, that we had just written a peer-reviewed paper in the Journal of Marketing Analytics here in London, and that was together with one of our clients where we looked at optimizing the allocation of available advertising inventories for its clients. Basically to deliver ads to viewers. It's a little bit technical, but delivering ads to viewers, you need to have the supply side partners and the demand side partners all able to be lined up. And so allocating the advertising inventories in an optimal fashion is also a very good use of reinforcement learning. You can almost say anywhere where you have large amounts of regular data, so regular iterations, like we said with Google paid search, like with digital ads, there's a great opportunity to use reinforcement learning because of the power of almost correcting and optimizing on the spot.
Okay, well, that's all the questions we have. If the audience would like more information from Laura, her contact information is on the screen, laura.murphy at amplifyanalytics.com. So thank you very much, Laura. Thank you for going through that with your voice issues. But try some lemon tea or some limoncello, whatever works for you, okay? And
thank you
we'll
very
see
much.
you next time. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Bye for now.
Bye.